You've most likely seen my guest on the hit web series Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. He goes under the name Linkara, and he rips apart bad comics old and new, and also comes across quite a few adventures while doing so. He has a robotic sidekick, a magic gun, a giant spaceship, and a sassy old lady nobody seems to understand named Fat Grandma. He starred in the channel Awesome Anniversary movies, Kick-Assia, Suburban Nights, and To Boldly Flee. And if I got any of that continuity wrong at all, I'm sure he'll let me know. Please welcome Louis Lovhaug. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine, but to correct you right off the bat...
Yeah, go ahead. Bring it on.
Fat Grandma is not really my character. At least I don't really count her as my character.
Well, when I ask someone for a cameo, I ask you. I don't usually go to Phelan.
But the thing is, I really do count Fat Grandma as their character, who I'm just acting out, because I would have never in a million years done Fat Grandma on my own.
You are, in fact, a vessel for Fat Grandma, that one day will be passed on to another.
The spirit possesses me. That's how, in the fan art we want to see out there, of her slapping Mussolini. That's the thing that ended up on Twitter. People wanted to see Fat Grandma slapping Mussolini with sass.
If nobody has done that yet, somebody get on that.
Someone did. I think one person did, but you know, it's always nice to see dictators get slapped. So keep going with it. Like go the full range, full axis of evil.
The name Lovhaug.
Mm-hmm.
That must have gotten you a lot of friends in school.
Oh God, yes. That was a fun elementary school experience. You love hogs. You love hogs. It's Norwegian.
Ah.
It honestly is. It's Norwegian. It means leaf hill.
It means what?
Leaf hill.
How does it feel
hill
to
of
have
leaves?
How does it feel to have a name that not only sounds that way but carries so much dignity? Obviously.
It does. Well, technically, my first name Louis means warrior, at least well-renowned warrior in several cultures. So basically, I'm the warrior on the hill of leaves. So that works in that regard.
Wow, that actually does come together much better than Louis Lovhaug.
Yep. Well, I think my parents named me after a Supreme Court justice. I can't remember which one, though. If I recall correctly. I mean, they told it like years and years ago.
It was probably the one named Louis.
It probably was.
You're one of the few people I know who openly acknowledges that you have a huge ego. You're very, very open with that.
Oh, God, yes.
And... yet, knowing that, I know you're a very cool guy. You're open to making fun of yourself, and you're wonderful with your fans. Where do you feel is the place where it could lose balance or could actually benefit you? Because it seems to benefit you great.
Well, I don't know if the ego itself benefits me, other than just having a lot of confidence. But the thing is, here's what's happened to me in the past. Back a long time ago. Well, I say a long time ago, like, 10, 12 years? My God, I feel old, even though I'm not. I wrote self-published novels, these horrible fantasy novels, which are still online available, and fans love to torment me by finding them and buying them and doing readings of them. And most recently they said, man, the second book isn't as good as the first one because it's not as funny because I got older and I got better at writing them. But the thing is, I was so proud of that. I was so proud of being a 14-year-old who had written his own novel, had done so, and that just started inflating the ego right up. I did like 2 or 3 more books. And from there, I just like, well, I got to keep this ego trip up. I got to promote these things and tell people all about it. Well, I know exactly what I'm doing. I started a webcomic for a while, Lightbringer, which I drew and wrote myself, and finally got some harsh critiques that knocked some sense into me. But the thing is, the ego doesn't carry you very well if you don't actually have anything to back yourself up on it. And the stuff that I produced was crap. And it was not good crap. I mean, the fans like it because they like seeing where I was back then, and they get some, enjoyment factor out of that. For me, though, it's like a popular writer, like judging Neil Gaiman on his first grade book reports or something like that. Of course, they're going to be crap compared to where they are right now. So in my case, it's seeing this ego trip kind of like smack me back down and realize, I'm not as great as I thought I was. I got to build myself back up, be more humble, and get myself back to a point where I can justifiably have that ego, be more open with it.
As somebody who also kind of acknowledges that he has a big ego and has feared having that take over me. I think something you sort of mentioned is that the failure can actually make you realize that, wow, when I fail it really hurts, but when I'm good, I know not to take it too much for granted. And if anything, when you do succeed, you feel better. And the ego does sort of allow you to say, hey, I can do this, but I know I'm not perfect, but it still gives you the courage to do it.
The other thing that helps out with that, especially with the fear of failure and knowing how glory is fleeting and all that, is seeing real life celebrities, real celebrities, not like internet celebrities like me. Real celebrities in the world who have like tabloid newspapers following them around. I see them destroying themselves in their own lives, and the damage they cause is because their egos get too much for them. So it's a constant knocking on the back of my head saying, don't get too full of yourself. Don't make the same mistakes others have made. Remember, this could all go away in a day. And don't let yourself make the same mistakes they do. Control what you say. Control what you do. Control the story, and don't let yourself be consumed by your own ego.
Probably the most obvious question I could ask, why comics? Because there are so many other forms of media out there that people get into, and it seems you started getting into it at a time where they're certainly known, but weren't as huge as they were now. You seem to get on just before that really big peak of the comic book movies and sort of this return to this comic explosion.
I got into comics in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was several years after the speculator boom, which for those of you at home who don't know what that is, it's when comics were suddenly being bought up mostly for collector's value rather than any like enjoyment out of the story. Suddenly comics were popular because, well, I could sell this years from now and I'll put my kids through college. We have like holofoil covers, and in this issue someone dies, and in this issue someone dies, and number 0 and number 1/2, number .73, and just all these special things that are supposed to be special. And of course, if everything's special, nothing is. And that's what happened. The reason why comics like Action Comics #1 or Detective Comics #27 are so expensive these days because there's not very many copies of them left. And if there's a million copies of Blood Gun number 3/4, then who cares? You don't need that. I got into comics around the time when Marvel was starting to recover from its bankruptcy. DC was doing really well creatively. It was a good time for comic books because the stories were pretty much the best they had been in a long time. Image had started to shed its own image of being the company that Rob Liefeld helped build with lots and lots of over-muscled, snake-spined women, and suddenly we have like actual stories being told, and this is the great independent market that you can go to and have a shot about getting into the bigger industry. Now, why comics in particular? Because I love comics. But in particular, the thing about me is I love superhero comics in particular, and there is a distinction that must be made there. Most people, when they talk about comic books, they're talking about superheroes because that's the mainstream. If there's one thing that is considered the American comic book, it's superheroes in general. That's what has overtaken the market. And there are plenty of other comics out there from indie publishers. You got your slice of life, you got your sci-fi, you got your fantasy, you got everything under the sun, but the only ones that sell in any great numbers are superhero stuff, at least in the USA. In Japan, where manga is popular all over the place, they have all genres are pretty much popular across the board. European comics, especially England, has 2000 AD, usually focusing on like sci-fi stuff and all that fun stuff. French is all over the place, and I keep just getting away from why comics. So why comics? I love superheroes. I love the heroic codes of them. I see them as modern-day mythology. I see them as modern-day knight errants, basically being people we can either relate to or ascribe to be more like, and generally just good people. And in some cases, with superhero comics, you can do things that, while they can envision them on the big screen and try to make them reality, you need a huge budget to pull that off, whereas an artist, the only limit is their imagination and talent.
With that said, on atop the fourth wall on your web series, you not only do reviews of comics, but you have this continuing storyline where you do go on these grand adventures. You have sidekicks, you have villains.
And this really indicates it's my point, because there's a lot of things that I envision in my head that aren't going to come across on a web series with a budget.
I was going to say, is this something where, when you were putting this together, either at the beginning or just as it went along, where you said, this is sort of my chance to do kind of a live-action comic book, or the closest that I can probably get away with?
Not at first. At first, it was just really inspired by the Nostalgia Critic, because... That hack.
He was a jerk.
What an ass. No, it was really inspired by the Nostalgia Critic and that style of reviewing, and I think the TV Tropes called it accentuates the negative. And there was really no market for that out. Well, there was a market, but no one had filled it yet. And now I originally started with text reviews. There were before video reviewing became a thing, especially with the advent of the AVGN and Armach A21. Most people were doing text reviews of movies and TV shows. And in particular, inspirations there were the Agony Booth, Jabutu's movie reviews, B-Movie Planet, just a bunch of places that were doing like long recaps of movies and adding their own humorous content to it. And I decided, well, I could try to do this with comic books, because I know I have a good passing knowledge of comic history, and I know plenty of bad comics out there, so I can start reviewing that. And after a while, it was fun, but it was time-consuming to write up all these things, and I wasn't getting any money out of it, so they became less frequent. I started off weekly, went to monthly, and then once in a blue moon. Then I discovered the Nostalgia Critic and a whole bunch of video reviewers who were doing this kind of thing, but in video form, and I was inspired to try to do that. So in terms of starting off a story, no, it was just I saw a creative enterprise that could potentially make money. I mean, I didn't expect to start off and like get rich quick, because
a lot of people do. From what I hear.
But I thought this would be a great way to spread my creative wings and do something, maybe make a little bit of side change if I was a little bit popular, because no one was doing comic book reviews as far as I knew.
You seem to come in at a time when, as I said before, it was not as huge as it was now. With comic books getting so popular now, most because of the market in films and making comic book movies, have you felt that, at least with superhero comics, that it still kept faithful to being as good as when you were introduced to them, or do you think there's stuff that can be fixed?
Oh God, no. I have this thing now especially with DC in particular. I won't go into the gory details, because that would be an hour-long interview where I'm just ranting and raving.
That's probably what this is going to be anyway. So
DC in particular, I have this thing now where anytime they do some bizarre creative choice or bizarre business decision, I just post this like image from The West Wing where President Bartlett tells Josh, true or false, my life would be better right now if we traded jobs. Why is it that for every good thing you do around here, we have to endure 3 screw-ups? And that's really how DC feels right now. I'm some asshole on the internet reviewing bad comic books, and there are days when I feel like I could be doing a better job, and that should not be the case. And DC is making good decisions over here, and then over here, it's like they're hitting themselves 3 times with a hammer and then trying to run the business.
Do you feel Marvel is?
Marvel has really overtaken things. Marvel has actually been on top of there's official chart of like top 10 companies in terms of sales. Marvel's been on top for a long time. DC used to top the sales, especially in the early 90s, and I think that's why some of the creative decisions are reflecting that these days. But Marvel has really pulled themselves out of their bankruptcy that they experienced in the mid to late 90s, and then they recovered from that, started selling movie rights to companies. Spider-Man was successful. Blade was successful. I was going to say Blade's DC? No, it's Blade's Marvel. We started seeing much more successful movie franchises, and then they decided to start Marvel Studios, and then we had the Avengers and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And they've done a bang-up job trying to have the comics reflect the movies, and the movies reflect the comics as best as they can. And they finally come to realize there are demographics out there that we should be trying to appeal to, and we should not make this the all-white male heterosexual boys club. As we right now at the time of this interview at least, we have an all-female X-Men team. We have
sort of a contradiction, seeing how it is called X-Men.
yeah,
maybe X-People, or something, or just X.
yeah. But we also have new Miss Marvel, who is a Muslim teenager. We have more women headlining books, more women members of the Avengers and the Defenders. We had Avengers Academy that kind of got screwed over by Avengers Arena, but every company makes mistakes. But that's the thing. They're actually recognizing, even if we don't entirely get this, even though we don't always, we're not going to always make this right, but let's give it a try at least. Let's try to appeal to these. Let's actually try to appeal to these markets instead of trying to foster to the same 45-year-old comic fans that other people have been trying to appeal to, who are rapidly losing interest in this. Mind you, again, there are still mistakes being made. At the time of this recording, Wolverine is slated to die. Yeah, that'll stick.
I'm sure
he's really gonna stay dead.
He makes no money.
Oh, of course.
At all.
Yeah, they don't put him on every cover at all. But the Death of Wolverine event is, I don't know. I haven't looked into it myself, but the price of the book itself is gonna be like $5. Now, bear in mind, comics have not matched with inflation. They have not stuck around because in the early 80s, you could have a book that was still about 50 to 75 cents. Then steadily it started to raise up in price to about $1, $1.25. Then early 90s, speculator boom, comic prices jumped drastically, and they've never recovered from that. And books that would normally cost $3 have started to cost $4, and now they're pushing it to $5 for roughly the same amount of content. And is there no reason why people are jumping to digital and rejecting the old method of just the floppies, as they're called? And
well, really, just the page turning are now called floppies?
Yeah, magazine style comics. Because because there's a difference. You have floppies, which are the single issues. Then you have trade paperbacks, which are collections of like 6 to 10 issues or so. And some people have said, well, I'm going to stop reading the monthly stuff and just go over the trades because all the books are written for the trades anyway. There's less self-contained books out there. There's not something you could just just an individual comic you can just hand to someone and get them interested in it because it's, part 3 of a story or something, of a 6-part storyline. And the storylines themselves are not following like a 3-act structure because they're being stretched out longer and longer than they should be. They're written for the trade, as it's called.
Now, of course, ton about really bad comics. You've seen some of the worst. Of course, gotta ask, what is the absolute worst that you have seen, whether you reviewed it or not?
It used to be this comic that I still want to remain secret just because I'm still on the fence about it. It was this comic from Image. I still won't want to say the name of it, but it was really bad. It failed in everything, in story, in character, in artwork, in writing. It just was an icky book from start to finish.
Could you give us a time period of when it came out?
90s. I'm pretty sure 90s. If not that, early 2000s. But I'm more and more moving towards Frank Miller's Holy Terror as the worst comic book I've ever read. The artwork is atrocious. The message is against everything I believe in. It's very racist, or at the very least, even if you want to say, well, he doesn't actively say all Arabs are evil. At the very least, it is very bigoted towards Islamic people, at the very least, and equates them all as terrorists.
Now, you mentioned
I reviewed it for my 300th episode.
I was going to say, you reviewed Miller stuff countless times, practically, even have a section called Miller Time, just dedicated to making fun of just him in general and what a crackpot he can be sometimes. Is there ever this fear that you're going to run into one of these people you talk bad about, whether it be a Miller or a Liefeld or any of those people?
There's always that fear, but I have little fear of actually meeting them in person. Really, I fear more that they're going to try to send like a cease and desist letter against the videos, which I think I should be probably fine just for legal reasons. But at the same time, I don't want to like cause a stink because some of these people, especially Frank Miller, he's crazy. He's cray-cray. He is made.
But that's perfect. So if he comes after you with legal action, he'll be like, "And this is my lawyer, a crab," and he would just have
No,
like,
but he's
on his
not.
side.
He's not that kind of crazy. He's the kind of crazy who rants about conspiracy theories and all that. But he probably has. But he still works in Hollywood, so it's possible he has like legitimate lawyers who aren't crazy and can probably and if they wanted to could probably shut down a video.
Lawyers so good they can make crazy sounds.
Yeah. Which is disappointing. I mean, it would be sad, but that's the worst of it, that I wasted time working on something. That's the worst that could probably happen. They couldn't shut down the entire show or something. The worst is they stop a video, I feel depressed for a day because I wasted all that time, and then move on with my life. I have little fear of them actually confronting me in person, mostly because, as far as they're concerned, I'm just some asshole on the internet. The same thing happened with Joe Quesada in One More Day. That was the 200th episode. It was a story about Spider-Man making a deal with Satan to erase his marriage. That's the abstract, of course, of the story. It's much more boring and stupid than that over the course of it. But someone tried to send the link to him to the videos, and he said, "I don't feel like reading any critiques of my work." So clearly, he didn't click on them because he would have known it was a video and not a written thing. So and that's the thing. A lot of these creators, they have thick skin. They don't care if some jerk gave them negative reviews, and they move on with their lives.
Have you ever had a creator of a comic that was actually thankful or happy of something you said? Because on top of that, you were actually in a comic recently.
Two comics, actually.
Two comics.
Yeah, I've actually run into several comic creators. It's rarely ever a writer or an artist. In this case, the ones that always pop out in my mind, I think, was an artist who helped work on Dark Knight Strikes Again as like a letterer or a color or something, and that was a case of friend of a friend had heard, who had known it. But the more direct one I had was Nightcat, the cover artist for Nightcat, which was a comic hit from the mid-'90s about Marvel trying to promote a new singing superheroine. They had a tie-in woman who would go around to conventions, and they released an album to accompany it. It was crap. But the cover artist was very liked the review because I was very complimentary to the cover, because the cover was really good. It was this nice painted style, and he used his actual cats in it, just as models in it. But otherwise, yeah, I've appeared now in 2 comics, just as a cameo. One was an issue of a Sonic comic, and of course the creators' names escape me. I feel very disappointed. I feel very ashamed that I don't remember their names, but I've had minor communications with them. I might do something with them later on, just because they've offered. And the other one was a larger cameo in My Little Littlest Pet Shop, I think is what it is. I keep wanting to call it My Little Pet Shop.
I know, because of the pony thing.
Yeah, The Littlest Pet Shop, which both the artist and the writer are fans of my show, and they just stuck me as a background cameo, talking with a woman who has red hair, so Obscures Lupa claims that it's her. And it's just me like smugly looking, hey, comics. And they both sent messages to me letting me know, hey, we drove this and we were big fans of your show, and they sent me a signed copy of it. And I was like, that's wonderful. That is glorious. I love these people who know that most of the time I usually try to avoid attacking the character of the people who create stuff. I mean, I will call them idiots sometimes, but usually I reserve that for people who just make really boneheaded writing mistakes that they should know better about, especially if I keep seeing a repeated pattern of their work. But otherwise, I try not to attack their moral or ethical centers or them as a person. Frank Miller I'll gladly do, because he's a racist, homophobic, sexist asshole.
Now, with this show, with the top of fourth wall and all these characters that you play a lot of them, and you have these storylines that have the strong continuity and they continue on, what made you actually want to go from just reviewing comics to turning this into this great big grand epic that always keeps going? Because you have these very tightly knit stories that go on, and even when we do something for the anniversaries, you check to make sure that the continuity matches, that it's not going to get in the way, which, even though we make fun of you like that for, I still highly respect, because I think both of us have seen whatever art form, whether it be movie or comic or whatever, where they clearly don't care, or they'll just make it up, or they're like, who cares? Red Dwarf has done that a lot.
Yeah, but at least with Red Dwarf, that's a comedy. It's not meant to be taken just too seriously.
You're a comedy too, though, and you take it very seriously. There's definitely the sense that you try to keep it very controlled. How did it go from just reviewing comics to this really long, grand storyline?
It started out with the Mechakara stuff. I kind of had a recurring element of Dr. Insano, who would sometimes appear in the video and disrupt Linkara's work, but he wasn't really a serious threat. It was just something fun to do because Linkara is the comic book guy, reviews superheroes, superhero versus supervillain, that kind of thing. Around the time of the Superman versus the Terminator review, there's a crossover for you.
There you go.
I decided, I want to have something to draw in viewers. I want to have a recurring element that keeps them watching every week to see if there's advancement of it. So I decided, well, how about an evil robot version of Linkara? And I had no, and it's funny you compliment me on the continuity and whatnot, because the very first two storylines I did, mostly on the fly. It would go like 3 or 4 weeks, and I decided, well, I should really have another storyline thing, and I'll keep making it up as I go along. And in this case, I was like, okay, he wants to get the magic gun. Why? Well, I'll figure that out later. And usually by like November or October, I had figured out, how it was going to end. Maybe I hadn't written out how it was going to end yet, but I knew what direction it was heading, the backstory and whatnot, and I could write that out later. So it started out just as a way to get viewers more invested and more interested, and they seem to have really become invested. I recently tried to run a poll, had to stop the poll early, unfortunately, but got about 2,000 responses. And of that, only about 16% did not care for the storylines. That's pretty good numbers, I would say. I used to think it was a half and half, but more people these days are watching the storylines than not, it would seem.
I bet they just complain really loudly, though.
No, not as much anymore. I do remember a comment back in the day. It had been like 2 months since the storyline episode, because when a storyline ends, I take a break to plan out the next one, relax a bit, so I don't have to do lots and lots of intense filming, especially for fight scenes and whatnot. And this guy went off on a tirade about, I hate your show, and I hate, because you have the storylines. God, why do you include all this story crap? Why do you keep doing this? And I would remind you, this episode did not have any storyline elements in it. And it had been 2 months since I had done a storyline episode. He just brought this up right the hell out of nowhere. It's just this ranty tirade against them. I don't know where they came from, why they did it, but if you're gonna complain to me about it, at least do it on a video where it's actually relevant.
Do you find that you're obviously very good with your fans, you respond to a lot of your fans, I've seen you at conventions where you're very strong about no matter how long the line is, we will get through them all, we will sign everything. I mean, you're very, very dedicated. Creatively, how much do you listen to your fans in terms of the choices you make? If a certain amount of people don't like something, do you change it, or do you trust your gut, or do you let them influence? How much influence do the fans have on either the review or the storylines?
Most of those, they do have an influence, but it's mostly on the minutia. It's not on the overall direction of the storyline, except for maybe, oh man, that's a good idea, I'll write that down for later. But most of the time, they affect like backstories and names for things that I try to come up with, but they have better names for. For example, Dr. Linksano. His name was not originally Dr. Linksano. It was just some other parallel universe Dr. Insano. But the fan name for him became Linksano. And the fan backstory for him was that he was the other Schlumper brother from a review that Spoonie had done called Party Mania, which featured two nerdy kids, the Schlumper brothers, Oscar and I can't remember the other name, and Oscar and Wayne, and Wayne in that video went off and became the Dr. Insano of that universe. And I decided, well, okay, the fans like him as being the other Schlumper brother, so Dr. Linksano is that Schlumper brother. And so they influenced that. The magic gun has a spirit of a child inside of it. And originally, I didn't have a name for her. She was just the spirit of the gun. It would just be like an ongoing thing that we didn't know her name. But there was a fan art of her that named her Maggie because Maggie, magic gun, ha ha ha. And I said, that's actually a good name. And I named her Margaret. So yeah,
pretty much the same thing.
Oh yeah. So basically, they affect and influence all the little stuff that's not important to the grand scheme of things. They'll come up with some great fan ideas that I will incorporate later on. But for a single storyline, I know where it's going. I have faith in my own writing ability to make it fulfilling for them. Although things will change over time. I remember the Entity storyline was originally going to end with a fight, but it's going to be me versus an eldritch abomination god glitch entity thing. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I could fight it, or I could not look like a Mary Sue and be killing this thing, and no fight would be satisfying after all the build-up, so let's try something different with that.
Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media, again, you very much interact with your fans. But again, both of us have seen people who have also gotten lost in that and sort of let the fans decide what their emotions will be and decide everything. What do you think is best in finding that balance of communicating with fans but not letting them rule your life necessarily either?
The fans, in the end, really are my bosses, in my opinion anyway, because without their views, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing. There is no show if there are no viewers. And in this case, as such, I feel an obligation to them to deliver a good product and to listen to their own feedback and their complaints and their suggestions. And I will not necessarily always take it into regard because I will think in some cases I know better than them in this case. They might think they know what they want, but I really know what they want. And it's not meant to be pretentious. It's just meant to be, I know how this is going to develop, and I know that they are going to ultimately be satisfied with the end product, and 99% of the time they are. There's always fringe elements who say, I didn't enjoy this as much, but for the most part, the majority try to stay happy. And the thing is, the reason why, aside from the fact that they are, without them, I would not have a show and the means to live off of it, but I was in their place once. I was a fan. I was a fan of the Nostalgia Critic before I became a video producer myself and got on the same website. So I know where they are coming from. I understand where they're coming from, where they get really excited about something and get really hyped about something, and the love they feel about interacting with somebody. And if I can just bring a little bit of joy into their lives, why not? I'll retweet their own videos or their Kickstarter or something like that. If it brings them just a little bit of joy, why the heck not?
Where comics are now, this very interesting place where I don't think they've ever had quite this connection with not just the social media, but just films. Such a big connection now. Where do you see comics going? Do you think this is as tall as it's going to go for a while, or do you think it has even more room to grow?
The big problem we have right now is that while there is a connection storyline-wise with the films and whatnot, there are a few problems here. One, they're not actually getting that many new readers. They should be trying harder to get more readers, but comic companies are slow to move with the times. Bear in mind, it's taken them this long to be in a state where Marvel can say, yeah, we have an X-Men group that's made up all of women, where we have a book, a headlining book that we are promoting heavily with not only a Muslim superhero, but a big name Muslim superhero in that regard. It's taking them this long to do that, to acknowledge that 50% of the audience is women and 50% of the readers are women. And they want to actually start appealing to them because they've been stuck in this boys club mindset for so long. And they have been slow to work on new technologies. They've been slow to release stuff digitally, or they're afraid of alienating comic book store owners because that is the direct market. That is where they make their money. And in this case, the future of comics is going to be digital, whether they like it or not. Web comics are still big. they're still popular, and in some cases they're a lot more popular than regular comics.
It's very rare that I see, hey, did you see the sales of print recently and paper? They're going up and up more every day.
And don't get me wrong, I love printed stuff. I love having actual books, and that will never stop. That will never end where people just like say, no, I don't want physical books anymore. I just want my little electronic device that I can drop and lose everything on it. No. That's never going to change. But the thing is, they need to be willing to embrace the new technologies out there for digital distribution. And if that means creating original content strictly digital, so be it. And going back to that DC makes one good decision, then 3 bad ones. A good decision they made recently was that they announced an all-digital Wonder Woman book with, like, top-name talent. And I'm like, yay! Why the hell wasn't this here 3 years ago?
I like to end every interview with the same 2 polar opposite questions. And the first one is, what is the toughest thing you have ever had to go through, whether it be personal or professionally, and how did you get through it?
Toughest thing I've had to go through. I lead a pretty charmed existence, I must say. Toughest thing I've had to do. Hearing any kind of mass disappointment from people. It happens, not very often, but I do hear disappointment from fans sometimes where I just honestly, they feel I've let them down, and it makes me feel depressed too, because like I said, I feel they're my bosses. They are the ones who I could not do this without them. And if I ever see that kind of thing, I just want to be like, well, is there anything what can I do now in the future to do better with that? And that's really how I try to work through these kind of things. I suppose in terms of personal life and whatnot, losing Juario was pretty hard hitting for me. My mom likes to say that I'm pretty good at bouncing back after bad news or something really hits me. And it's true, but it hurts, and there's constant reminders of little things like that. And, best thing I can offer is life moves on. You can't just keep focusing on it for the rest of your life. You have to be willing to move on because there's so much more to do the next thing around the corner. And that's probably what helps me do it. The fact that the show must go on. I must get that episode out on Monday.
And finally, what is the proudest thing, whether it be professional or personal, that you feel you've ever done in your life?
Anytime I get an email from someone telling me, you have made my life better. I was in a dark place for this time. Watching your show helped me. You made me laugh on days where it seemed like nothing could make me laugh. I always love to tell this story. Not necessarily a story, but this basic quote, because people sometimes ask me, how do you deal with all the troll hate that happens around you? You get people who say your show sucks, your show is horrible, you're not funny, you stretch too much for jokes, I hate everything you do, all that kind of stuff. How do you deal with that kind of stuff? How do you deal with someone telling you you'll never be as popular as the Bee Gees? That's a real comment, by the way. How do you deal with that? I have a job that allows me to be creative, allows me to work from home, allows me to set my own hours. I get to work with an awesome group of people who are smarter than me, who I am proud to call my friends. I am dating someone beautiful and wonderful who loves me, and I love them back. I have a great apartment. I have a great job. I have a great life. And people tell me that I have made their life better. What the hell is a troll going to say that's ever going to top that?
This has been Lewis Lovhaug, and this has been Shut Up and Talk. Thank you. Now this is the part where we can talk a little bit, and I'm going to say something really funny.
That wasn't actually that funny, no.
Yeah, no, it was. Shut the hell up. That was funny. I'm being much funnier than you, right?
Oh, yeah. Whatever. I think
okay,
I'm the real funny one.
Smile, let's go.
Yeah, let's see how funny it is. I'm never being on this talk show again.
I don't want you. Okay.